It's only been 2 months since my 2-year relationship with Lori ended. She dumped me because, according to her, we weren't moving forward. I couldn't understand why there was such a rush. After all, we were only in our 20s and everything was going great. Why risk ruining everything by getting married, right? Well, she didn't think so and handed me the goodbye papers. I missed her dearly, but honestly, it intensified a lot of the feelings I was having. I had been playing the field for the last couple months and was having a great time, although I felt a little empty at times. I've been sleeping about 3 times a week. Granted, Lori and I used to do it 5 or 6 times a week, so that was a step down, but at least those hookups were without commitment. Tonight I was alone, sitting at the local sports bar, eating wings and beer and watching the first quarter of the game between the Colts and Texans. There was no score, and the game had been pretty boring so far. Marks? Only one person had ever called me Marky. I looked up and saw a face I hadn't seen in 5 years. "Marky, it's you, oh my God!" She threw herself into my lap and sank into me in a kiss that threatened to suck every last molecule of air out of my lungs. But she was always like that. "Wow, Rayanne, how are you?" "I'm fine, and now I'm even better. It's been too long. What are you doing?" "Nothing. Just eating dinner and watching a shitty soccer game. What about you?" "I was just walking by and saw you. I had to see if it was you. Why don't we grab a coffee or something?" "Sure." We walked out of the sports bar and stopped at Grinder's Coffee a couple doors down. Rayanne and I met in college, and I fell in love with her at first sight. She had long blonde hair and a beautiful, trim body. In the first semester of junior year, we were assigned to the same group to work on a project. We instantly hit it off and spent the night at our group's second project meeting, partying till we dropped, after the others had left, of course. That should have been my first clue. We fell in love hard and fast. I'd like to say we were inseparable, but that's not the realities of college life. We each had other classes and study groups, and I was also working part-time. My folks could handle the expenses just fine, but they wanted me to do a little work myself. As a result, we were apart as much as we were together. Sexually, Rayanne was insatiable. I was usually the one to offer to do something, anything, before just jumping into bed for sex. I didn't want our entire relationship to be built on physical intimacy alone. Things had been great for almost 2 years, and I was planning my proposal as graduation approached. I was at work one night, but was sent home early when one of the cars broke down and we had to close for repairs. I decided to surprise Rayanne with my sudden appearance, and isn't that always the way? I showed up at her apartment, and upon opening the door, her roommate Tony was immediately wary. She tried to tell me that Rayanne wasn't home, but her car was in the parking lot, and Rayanne never goes anywhere without her car. But I still wasn't about to barge in until I heard an "Oh my God, yes!" from deep inside the apartment. Since it was just the 2 of them living there, it was either Rayanne or they were letting some other woman have fun in their apartment. I squeezed past Tony, intending to catch her in the act, but she grabbed my arm and tried to stop me. It was so like her to try to reason with me at such an emotional moment. "Mark, she loves you. She really does. She's just trying something before she calms down. You don't want to go there." She was right. I didn't want to go there, but I needed to go there. I continued toward the back wall, and Tony reluctantly let me go. She knew me well enough to know that I wouldn't go on a rampage unless provoked, of course, so she didn't try to stop me again, but there was a look of sadness on her face. I was ready to catch her with a guy. That much was obvious. But I was most definitely not prepared for catching her with 2 of them. The door opening caught their attention, and all 3 of them turned in my direction like cats following a laser pointer. At first, Rayanne just stared at me in shock. I could almost hear her mind saying, "You should be at work." But I have to hand it to her, she didn't say it. After seeing everything I needed to see, I turned around and walked out. I'm pretty sure I heard Marky as I left, but maybe it was my imagination or just wishful thinking. I felt just awful. I really thought we had something, and to find out that Rayanne had just used me, that I was just another guy she'd screwed over, was a huge blow to my ego. Was I really so ignorant that I couldn't understand her? Or did we have an exclusive relationship, but she decided I wasn't enough for her? Suddenly, I had doubts about myself as a person, as a man, and certainly as a potential husband. And the worst part was that I still loved her with all my heart. I couldn't even bring myself to talk to her right now. I was sure she would tell me how inadequate I was, so she needed to have sex with someone else. In fact, I was such a disappointment that she needed 2 men to make up for how bad I was. I somehow made it through the last few weeks of school without my grades dropping. She tried to convince me that she really loved me and that she was just having a few experiences before we settled down for the rest of our lives. Yes, that's right, a few experiences. In the interest of complete honesty, she completely ripped all vestiges of dignity and self-esteem from me by informing me that she had slept with me for 6 months, but all of those were, in her opinion, unusual opportunities. Basically, she wanted to experience all these things in her life and couldn't do it by getting married. Consequently, she had to do all of these things, or at least all of the things she was sure I would disagree with, before committing herself to the bonds of marriage. Most, but not all, consisted of more than one at a time. One was a visit to our local adult bookstore and a visit to one of their glory holes. This satisfied her desire for an anonymous sexual encounter. She had no idea who was on the other side of the wall and thinks there may have been several because she didn't think one guy could come around so quickly. In fact, she admitted, the threesome I walked in on was one of her mildest adventures. She also rode trains, did gangbangs, and even participated in a lesbian orgy involving 6 women, although she never once showed any interest in me with other women. She says it was fun and is already trying to figure out how to get me to let another woman into our bed. Oh, to get her to play with him instead of me. She just couldn't get over it, she said. When all was said and done, she insisted that it was all out of her system and she was ready to be my loving, faithful wife. Of course, by this time, my self-esteem and self-worth were completely shot, as was my trust in her. Even though I knew it was the right thing to do, it was still one of the hardest things I had ever done in my life for many reasons. I was still struggling with my sense of self-worth. I fell into a depression that I continued to struggle with on a regular basis. And here she is, 5 years later, looking as beautiful and sexy as ever, and suddenly none of that mattered. She wasn't wearing any rings, I checked, and I was single again. Just meeting her brought back all the feelings of love I had felt for her when we met, and I couldn't wait to find out if she was really ready to be a faithful wife. Oddly enough, the step I couldn't bring myself to take with Lori, I was practically dying to take with Rayanne. We talked about her job, real estate, and my job, benefits coordinator at a local company, reminisced about the good times we'd had together, but it seemed like we were avoiding the status of our relationship. I assumed she noticed my ring finger as I did hers, so perhaps we both thought it was unimportant. We left the coffee shop and headed to a club for some dancing and drinks. The passing years hadn't dampened her energy or her sexuality. More than one guy asked her to dance when we took a break, and she blew every one of them away. I was having a great time, and began to wonder what the future held for me. I quickly paid our bill and we left. She didn't feel comfortable leaving the car, so she followed me to my apartment. No sooner had we entered the entryway than we were already pulling off our clothes and each other. Finally, completely exhausted, we rolled over onto our backs and dozed off. I woke up to Rayanne moving around my bedroom. She was finishing getting dressed and gathering her things. She tried to be quiet but smiled when she saw me get up. She sat on the edge of the bed holding her purse. "I have to go home. Can't you stay?" She smiled at me, reaching for her purse. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised to see her putting rings on her finger, but I was. "I can't. My husband doesn't like me staying out all night." Are you married?" "Yes, for 3 years now." "But what was that? I thought—" She reached for me gently, taking my hand in hers. "It was just sex, baby. Look, Marky, the truth is, I'm a slut. I was a slut before I met you. I was a slut while we were together, and I've been a slut ever since. I just happen to have found a husband who doesn't mind. With any luck, he's spent the night with some hottie himself." I don't understand." "Look, Carl and I are more like good friends than lovers. We met one night, we liked it, and we went out a few more times. Neither of us were cut out for monogamy, but we became very close and decided to get married. I don't love him the way I loved him. Hell, the way I still love you." But when I come home after having sex with some guy, it makes me feel better to have someone around. Have you ever had sex? Oh yeah, I probably get half my sex life from it. Marky, the truth is I just love having sex with new